Here I have my wearer's left front skirt, I believe. And I'm going to go ahead and true this. So this here, this line right here, that's my center front. So I'll just write center front on there. Or it's pretty close to my center front. I think my center front is a little bit this way, but so I'm going to true this line here. So what I am doing is I'm putting my ruler on the marks that I made. And then once I have my ruler on the marks that I made, I'm looking to see if there's some other landmark on my ruler to make sure that I am keeping this straight from the HBL, which is this line right here. So from the HBL down, I want this to be straight. So for me, when I have my ruler on the marks that I made, it looks like the 1/4 inch line on my ruler aligns with some of the X's that I drew for the cross grain and the straight grain. So that's how I know I'm going to keep that straight. And this line that I'm drawing, it's just a reference line, a landmark, to help me figure something else out. So here we go. Draw my little landmark line there. So now I already made the mark on my muslin. I need to measure out a 1/2 inch at the HBL, and I need to measure out about a 1/4 inch at the top here where my yoke is. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my real side seam from HBL down that includes my 1/2 inch ease out at the HBL. So again, making sure that this is straight. And then I need to blend from my ease at the HBL side seam up to my ease at the waist. So I need to blend from here to here so that it looks smooth. So I'll take my hip curve or my variform curve, and I'll put the straighter edge near my straight side seam line and the curve edge up towards my hip. You know, I just thought of something. I can go grab my block that I made for this form and see how that hip works. So let me go grab that. So I'm lining up my HBL and my center front. And this is coming in much further. My block that fits the form is coming in much further, which makes sense because I did some manipulation over here. But I'm still going to use the shape of the curve. So I'm not going to leave the HBL line even, and I'm just going to pivot this here. And then so that I don't mess up my paper, I'm going to try and find that spot on my ruler. So that looks pretty good. So now that I know where that spot is on my ruler, I'll go ahead and use my Variform curve. I'll use that to blend into my side seam. So this was where the mark was that I made on the dress form, and then I needed 1/2 inch ease here. This is the mark that I made for where the yoke was, and then I needed 1/4 inch ease here. So now I have that drawn. Now I need to draw my front, or true my front. So let's see what we have here. So I'll want my, just for a little bit from my side seam, I want that to be square. Not for a long time, but for at least 1/4. So I'll line my ruler up with my side seam and then draw a straight line until my dots start to deviate from my ruler. So that looks like about there. And then let's see if I can get this to work, maybe. So your dots are going to be a little wobbly, and the objective of truing is to make them smooth. So that gets me part of the way. And let's see, does this want to be a straight line or does it want to be a curve? I think from there it wants to be a curve this way. Very subtle curve. And then let me draw myself a platform from my princess seam. Actually, I can go ahead and true my princess seam and then square that off. So my distance from my center front line that I drew on my muslin along my HBL out to the princess seam is 4 1/4, it looks like. So I'll come down here and also measure out 4 1/4. And yours will be different. Yours won't be 4 1/4. And then I'll go ahead and draw a straight line there for where my princess seam is going to be. And then I'll true my gathering. So I think this will be easier for me to see if I turn it this way, because the light is creating a shadow on the ruler, so I can't see my line. So if I turn this way, I can see this better. And then I just want to blend from my princess seam a curve along my gathering line. And then from that curve, I want to square out just for a second. And then I'll blend between there. So it looks like my curve wants to go this way. Interesting. it wants to go like this. And then it wants to go like this. Let's see, do I have a sharper curve around here somewhere? Let's try this. See if I can get these to blend here. So I'm not sure why that's doing that dip. But that seems to be what it wants to do. All right, so, and then for the bottom, I just want it to be, like for my hem, I just want it to be square. So I'll go ahead and measure from my HBL down the same amount on both sides. So I think I'll do 23 because I have enough fabric on both sides for that. And then I'll figure out what I'm going to do with my hem later when I put the seam allowance on my pattern. So 23 from HBL and 23 from HBL. And yours can be different. And then I'll go ahead and just trim some of this excess off. So similar to drawing seam allowance, I'll just give a 1/2 inch margin. This little jog here doesn't make a lot of sense to me, so I think I'm just gonna continue straight up here and just blend that way. And because it's adding extra, if I need to trim it away later and I find that that's really not supposed to be there, then I can do that. But it just doesn't make sense to me that it's bending in like that. So, drawing my margin here. And then over here. And then over here. And then I can cut off that excess. I'm not going to put any margin at the hem. I'm just going to cut it right at it. It's finished length, or that's kind of what it is right now. It's finished length. Without really testing how long it is. So once I have all my shapes trued and trued on the drape, I can pin them together, put them on the form, make any notes or edits that I want, and then I can true again if I need to with my notes and edits, and then transfer that to paper. And then with the paper pattern, I'll add seam allowance and notches and everything so that I can, when I cut it out of fabric, I can tell where what my sewing instructions are, like how to line things up. And then I would cut that out of muslin and sew it up and make more edits if I needed to and fix the pattern. And then once I felt like I had it, like even after I make the edits to the pattern after the muslin, I would probably cut it in fashion fabric and still think of that as like research and development, not my final product. And I would sew that up and make notes and edits to my pattern once I made it in fashion fabric. And then once I did that in fashion fabric, at that point, I might be ready to transfer it to manila. So this process is very iterative, and it's not like the first time you do it, everything just works out. You have to do some tests, multiple tests and checks and proofs and measuring in order to get where you're going. But we're gonna, because of our limits on our time, we're gonna cut some of the steps, just knowing that our process is abbreviated, and things aren't probably going to be perfect by the time we're calling it finished. There's probably still some more things that are going to need to be fixed, but we'll have learned what we need to learn from the process. So that's probably how we're going to do it. So I have my drape trued. I'm going to true some more parts, at least the other part of the skirt that sews to the princess seam here, so that I can pin it together and try it on the dress form and see if there's any additional edits I want to make.